Hello and welcome to another EG Daily. I'm Jack Lindsay, and I've been tinkering around on my setup. You guys have been asking me to maximize the trailers when I watch them. OBS has not been liking that. It cuts them in half, it's blowing the sound out. So I've been doing some troubleshooting and calling on the aid of certain wizards. And if everything works like it's supposed to now, I should be able to bring trailers into full screen and the sound will be fine and everything will be great. Now I just gotta figure out how to get this mic to pick me up better. It's got this thing over here. How do I... You know what? Let me just... There. It's got that thing that it's hooked up to. But, that's a lot of glowing buttons. And I'm kind of afraid to press any of them. I'm sure Future Jack already knows how it all works. I know everything. But stuck back here in the past as I am, I must resign myself to the squalor of ignorance. Let's go ahead and check out this story I've got for you and use this daily as a test of making functional full screen transitions. By Mr. Jonathan Irwin. Oops, they did it again. Leaked World of Warcraft image has hit the internet. There's been speculation abound for nearly a year, perhaps a little more, that the next World of Warcraft expansion would be taking us to a realm beyond death, the Shadowlands, to face the next biggest threats to Azeroth. How are their next biggest threats at this point that anyone could find believable, simultaneously believable, and remotely relatable? It's going full anime at this point. I mean, this game started out as you were going on adventures. You were an adventurer going on quests and exploring this vast open world with all these secrets and treasures, and very relatable, right? And very much a theme in so many other games and literary traditions. And somewhere along the line, it kind of fell into this pattern that so many series-type media forms fall prey to, like comic books or anime, where instead of telling a kind of organic story, it becomes about always upping the ante, a series of incrementally more difficult battles, and each new one has to top the last. And there's power creep, and okay, so you started out adventuring and questing and exploring the world, and then the Burning Crusade brought the first big bad villain through Illidim Stormrage. And the whole expansion was about it wasn't about exploring so much the big world anymore. It was a more contained world in Outland, and everything thematically revolved around that ultimate arc of conflict with Illidan in the Black Temple. And he's this very formidable, imposing... He's part demon. He's fused with the Skull of Gul'dan. He's got the powers of the Burning Legion. And you have to recruit the help of Akama and Maiev. And, you know them from Warcraft 3 if you played that. And it's kind of a resolution to arcs that never got tied up before, but you beat him. In the end, ultimately you defeat him. So then the next expansion comes out, and they're like, okay, well, we gotta raise the level cap because it's an RPG, and you can't have an RPG without progression. Progression means you have to get stronger, so we're gonna have to have a stronger villain. And so they take you to Northrend, the frozen roof of the world, and you're gonna fight the Lich King himself, the master of the dead. Arthas, after he put on Ner'zhul's helmet and the two beings fused, the Fallen Prince and this interdimensional once-orc shaman. And Arthas was the central figure of Warcraft 3. His story arc was incredibly well-crafted and compelling. So to get to see a resolution of that, obviously very fulfilling. And again, it was a series of zones, a micro-world contained to this arc around Arthas. In Northrend, everything revolves around him. They had him kind of showing up and taunting the players every step of the way, which in my view cheapened him a little bit, but I see what they were doing. And of course, you take him out in the end with the formation of the Argent Crusade and Tyrion Fordring and all these forces that come together and unite, and that's of course that's the Blizzard theme. It's in every single one of their games. Oh, we have to unite for the greater good. That didn't used to be as tired as it is now. So you beat him, and then Cataclysm comes out, and they're like, well, how do we up the stakes now? And that reshaped the whole world with the Cataclysm, and you end up facing Deathwing, who was the aspect of Earth. I mean, he's basically a dragon, but he was once the guardian of all of Azeroth and was driven to corruption and madness by the old gods. And it takes the whole world coming together again, and Thrall has to become Jesus, and you take him out. And then, of course, another expansion, more progression, more levels up, a higher threat. Although, I gotta be honest, I don't Mr. Pandaria was just kind of weird to me. I don't really know what to say about that one, except, well, every expansion had beautiful artwork and music, but the themes in the story, I guess the Pandaren were supposed to be some sort of analog of Zen Buddhists, but also they're raging alcoholics, and that was hilarious. And I remember that mission where you have to train with the monk, the master monk, and he's teaching you in the forest. And it's like from 100 scenes from 100 movies of the coming-of-age story where the young warrior goes to meet the old master on top of the mountain, and he's supposed to be dispensing this sage advice and wisdom and teaching you how to do different things. And one of the tasks he asks you to do is to go up to the top of this mountain and collect eggs from these cranes. And he's like, oh, the cranes will defend themselves. Because, they all talk to him like hokey, fake Asian accents. And I'm like, okay, go and murder these cranes that are trying to stop you from stealing their babies. Let's see the payoff on this. Let's see how this is. What's the greater wisdom, the Confucian proverb that this will be distilled down to after we've slaughtered all these birds and stolen their children. And we come back down the mountain to his hut, and he's like, now you will take the eggs and throw them at targets. And it's like, we could have done that with rocks. You murdering alcoholic? There was no reason that those baby birds had to die. If the point was just to throw them at one point, they film a montage of you training with him, and he's not even, he just drops some of the eggs and they break, and he's just like, oh, they will never see another day. It's just like, what did I learn by this? You're not a wise master. You're some drunk living alone in the woods. You see, the key to inner harmony. No, this is stupid. You're stupid. I have expected to come back to the people who'd sent me to him and them to be rolling on the floor. We sent you to the lunatic. Yeah, that was just a really weird expansion. Is that the one that introduced the Hosen? God, Warcraft started getting dumb. Anyway, you overcome the threats there, and of course a new expansion has to come out, which means more progression, which means up the ante, but in Warlords of Draenor, they upped the stakes by saying, well, you're going to fight the original Horde from an alternate timeline. And it's like, but we already fought like this supreme undead entity, this evil being that could psychically command legions of dead that outnumbered the living. Like, these are just the bad guys from Warcraft 1 that came through the portal, but without the Fellblood that gave them the demonic strength that you later retcon. That was a higher increment of threat that it wasn't plausible. Within the context of the story that they had created, that didn't make sense. That was supposed to be more dangerous. And then, of course, next was Legion, which was the craziest. Like, you could believe, you got to get stronger, you got to progress, they got to have a bigger threat. And you really could believe that this was the biggest threat you'd faced. Because it was like almost a sci-fi threat. Like fleets of literal spaceships that fly around the universe, just ending them, and unfathomable cosmic entities locked in a conflict for the literal souls of sentient worlds. I mean, that was crazy. That was already, like, at that point, it's officially anime. I mean, you're calling down orbital strikes from your super golden spaceship. At that point in Legion, even though I felt it was really well designed, I'm like, man, we have come a long way from just being adventurers, from exploring, from setting out into a world and getting lost in it. When you have to keep upping the stakes, when each new expansion has to be about how this is the greatest threat, even greater than the greatest threat before, it really just flattens the storytelling capacity of the game. And that's really important in an RPG. It lessens immersion. And I gotta be honest, I don't even know what Battle for Azeroth was about because I was just too disappointed at that point. Like, the game was so unrecognizable to me, and not in a good way. So now I read this, and Jonathan's right. They're gonna spin it this way to be the next biggest threat. And it's gonna be something like the concept of death itself. And it's just like, in what way is this remotely relatable? Like, stories have to be relatable. Whether they're told in book form or movie form or game form, part of what made the original Warcraft so compelling was that it was relatable to an innate drive in us to want to explore and to dream and to adventure and to become something. Fighting world-ending giant anime demons in their fleet of interdimensional spaceships, and then expecting us to believe that the next thing is even more danger. It's just absurd. It's garish. It's gaudy at this point. It's the storytelling equivalent of giant fake acrylic nails and puffy collagen lips and thickly caked on makeup to hide the aging face underneath. Anyway, you guys did this to yourself by telling me you were fine with my rambling. This possibility has been amplified by the fact that the Banshee Queen Sylvanas has been entirely off her rocker for some time now. Don't even get me started on that character. We would be here for a long time. While the new expansion isn't 100% confirmed yet, it's looking more and more likely that regardless of whatever the official name ends up being, the Shadowlands will be playing a large role with the leak of a new image of Lich King Bolvar Fordragon descending the steps of the Frozen Throne. Yeah, but didn't he say he's supposed to be forgotten forever? Like, that was in that ending cinematic. No one can ever know what happened here, you gotta leave me. Whatever. It's no accident that they're hearkening back to when their stories were a little bit more grounded in something remotely relatable. We haven't seen or heard of Bolvar Fordragon in a major capacity since the closing days of 2008's Wrath of the Lich King expansion, where following the fall of Arthas Menethil to the heroes of Azeroth, Bolvar Fordragon sacrificed himself to keep the undead scourge in check. It had been revealed that there must always be a Lich King, or that the undead would become a far greater threat to Azeroth. Bolvar told Tyrion to tell the people that he died in battle, right? That the Lich King was dead, and to leave him forgotten on the frozen throne as the jailer of the damned. Now, let's run a test here and see if I can correctly maximize this, and we can watch it together.
Father, is it over?
At long last. No king rules forever, my son.
I see. Only darkness before me.
Without its master's command, the restless scourge will become an even greater threat to this world. Control must be maintained. There must always be a Lich King.
The weight of such a burden. It must be mine, for there is no other.
Tyrion! You hold a grim destiny in your hands, brother. But it is not your own.
Bolvar! By all that is holy.
The dragon's flame seal my fate. The world of the living can no longer comfort me. Place the crown upon my head, Tyrion. Forevermore, I will be the jailer of the damned.
No, old friend. I cannot.
Do it, Tyrion! You and these brave heroes have your own destinies to fulfill. This last act of service is mine.
You will not be forgotten, brother.
I must be forgotten, Tyrion. If the world is to live free from the tyranny of fear, they must never know what was done here today. dragon died with him. Now, go. Leave this place and never return.
No one must know what happened here until it behooves us to make more money. You know, I was never particularly impressed by the resolution of the Arthas storyline using Bolvar for Dragon. I mean, was it part... What was it, a highly visible part of the established lore that getting burned by a red dragon turned you into a fire zombie? I just don't remember that. I mean, maybe it was mentioned, but aside from the fact that that's a little weird, even within the context of fantasy, it just seemed like a kind of a Deus Ex Machina. Why was it necessary? Why couldn't Tyrion have just broken the helmet and, you know, they could have had it that would have ended the threat. It must have been that they were leaving a door open to come back to this. They were leaving a hook, a storytelling hook in there so that they could pull back way later and go, oh, okay, we still have this figure. We wrote all this space and territory in Northrend and lore, and it's not just going to be gone now. So perhaps it wasn't a matter of if we would see Bolvar again, Jonathan says, but when. Whatever his new role will be, friend or foe, is yet to be seen. Has he succumbed to the corruption of the helmet? Have the fires of the Lifebinder protected him? We'll most likely find out more Friday during one of the currently classified announcements at BlizzCon 2019. I put classified in quotes because at this point there have been enough pre-BlizzCon leaks that it's unlikely that each and every one of them have been by accident. While the fires of controversy have died down substantially, they've not all gone. There just haven't been any major incidents to report on for a few days. These leaks feel almost tactically placed, trying to gauge internet reaction as well as potentially dampening the impact of planned protests in and around BlizzCon. Of course, without concrete proof, it can't be said with absolute certainty, but if these leaks aren't on purpose, then it just demonstrates a certain level of incompetence. A leak here and there is one thing, several in the span of 2 weeks in the wake of a huge player backlash is another. You be the judge on that one. Yeah, it reminds me of a lot of people were saying they felt that those Star Wars leaks were intentional to kind of gauge public reaction. I honestly can't even speculate on that. What I can speculate on is that if you're seriously going to make something more threatening than the more threatening than the more threatening than the more threatening world-ending threat, I don't understand. That's just not good storytelling. It's not relatable at all. There's a price that is paid in extending a story beyond its natural arc. And all stories have arcs. All stories should end. That's one of the reasons why Breaking Bad was such an amazing piece of television. They wrote it with an end in mind. You better believe they could have milked it for more. They could have drawn it out and kept drawing paychecks and made money the top priority. And if they'd done that, it wouldn't have become a cultural icon. It would have gone the way of Game of Thrones. Storytelling matters. I got into World of Warcraft in the first place because of how impressed I was, how fun the story from Warcraft 3 was. It wasn't the greatest in the world, but it was really solid. And it was relatable. Even fantastical stories need to be relatable. Heroes need to be relatable. Through their struggles, and I don't mean struggles by, oh, I've got to arm wrestle a black hole. Villains need to be relatable as well. That's what makes a villain even more compelling. When part of you recoils inside, when you recognize part of yourself in them. It's just, a long time ago, I set out with a friend from Northshire Abbey into a vast and unknown world. It was an organic experience. We roamed together, we made our own stories. World of Warcraft has become a theme park. Each new expansion is a new ride, a new attraction. It's got to be shinier, it's got to be bigger than the last, but something has been lost along the way. If you still enjoy it, if you still get fun out of retail, that's fine. I'm not saying you can't or shouldn't. I just like to see some more Breaking Bad in the world, things of that caliber. I think I've rambled on for far too long. Soon we'll see what BlizzCon brings us. The next greatest threat, greater even than the one before. Hopefully the trailer swapping and volume all worked out pretty nicely today. You guys be sure to not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I won't forget to see you next time.